I'm Chloe, and I'm 28 years old. My sister just destroyed my wedding in front of 200 guests, claiming she saw my fiancé cheating on me. Plot twist. She was lying. And the recording my fiancé played back proved exactly how far she'd go to ruin the happiest day of my life. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. But let me take you back to where this whole mess started. See, my sister Emma has always lived in my shadow. Not because I put her there, mind you, but because she's spent her entire life comparing herself to me instead of building her own path. When we were kids, I was the one who got good grades without trying, made friends easily, and somehow managed to avoid the awkward teenage phase that hit Emma like a freight train. I remember when I was 15 and Emma was 13, she entered the same art contest I'd won the year before. I'd moved on to other interests by then, but Emma was determined to prove she could do what I'd done. She spent weeks on her painting, staying up late, missing sleepovers with her friends. When the results were announced and she came in third place, she cried for hours. Not because third place was bad, but because it wasn't first. It wasn't what I'd achieved. Mom found her sobbing in her room that night. Through the thin walls, I heard Emma whisper, "Why can't I be good at anything like Chloe?" It broke my heart then. I actually tried to give her my trophy from the previous year, thinking it might help. She threw it across the room. That's when I realized Emma didn't want to be good at something. She wanted to be better than me at everything. There's a difference, and it's a difference that would shape our relationship for the next 15 years. Our parents, bless them, tried their best to make things fair. They celebrated Emma's achievements just as loudly as mine, but Emma could never see it. Every family dinner became a performance where she'd list her accomplishments, waiting for someone to say she'd outdone me. When I got into state university, Emma suddenly decided she had to apply to private colleges. When I got engaged, Emma started hinting that her long-term boyfriend better propose soon. The pattern was exhausting, but I loved my sister. I thought maybe once she found her own thing, her own identity separate from competing with me, things would get better between us. I was naive enough to believe that my wedding might actually bring us closer together. After all, there's nothing quite like family gathering for a celebration to put things in perspective, right? Wrong. So incredibly, spectacularly wrong. Meeting Jake changed everything for me, and unfortunately, it seemed to change everything for Emma too. I was 25 when we met at a mutual friend's barbecue. He was a construction manager with kind eyes and the sort of practical intelligence that I'd always found attractive. Nothing flashy, nothing that screamed, "Look at me," just a solid, dependable man who made me laugh and actually listened when I talked about my work as a graphic designer. Our relationship developed naturally over 8 months of actual dates, real conversations, and building something genuine together. Jake would pick me up from work on Fridays and we'd try new restaurants or go hiking on weekends. Simple stuff, but it felt right. He remembered my coffee order, called when he said he would, and never once made me feel like I had to be anyone other than myself. When I brought Jake home for the first family dinner, I should have paid more attention to Emma's reaction. She'd been dating Marcus for 2 years at that point, a perfectly nice guy who worked in accounting and brought her flowers every Friday. But the moment Jake walked into our parents' dining room, something shifted in the air. Emma, who usually spent family dinners talking about her latest promotion or some drama at her office, became unusually quiet. Instead, she spent the entire evening asking Jake questions. What kind of music did he like? Had he traveled much? What were his favorite movies? Normal getting-to-know-you questions, except for the way she asked them. There was an intensity there, a focus that made me uncomfortable in ways I couldn't quite name.
"He seems really great," she told me later as we helped Mom clear the dishes. "You're so lucky to find someone like that." Lucky. Like I'd won Jake in a lottery instead of building a relationship with him, but I brushed it off. Emma was probably just being friendly, right? Over the next few months,
Emma found reasons to be around whenever Jake visited. If he came over to watch a movie, Emma would suddenly decide she needed to borrow something from Mom. If we were having dinner at my apartment, Emma would call with some crisis that required immediate sisterly advice. Always when Jake was there. Jake was always when she could monopolize his attention for 20 minutes while I dealt with whatever problem she'd manufactured. Jake, being the kind person he is, was always polite. He'd ask about her work, compliment her haircut, laugh at her jokes. Basic human decency, really. But Emma interpreted his kindness as something more. I started noticing the way she'd touch his arm when she laughed, how she'd position herself next to him in family photos, the way she'd bring up inside jokes from their conversations when I wasn't around. "Emma really looks up to you," Jake mentioned one evening as we drove home from my parents' house. "She talks about you a lot when you're out of the room." "What kind of things does she say?" I asked, though part of me didn't want to know, just how proud she is of you, how successful you are. She seems to think you have everything figured out. If only it were that simple. Emma wasn't talking about pride. She was studying me, trying to understand what made Jake choose me over someone like her. And in her mind, if she could figure out the formula, maybe she could replicate the results. The first real warning sign came about a year into my relationship with Jake. Emma had broken up with Marcus the month before, claiming they weren't compatible long-term. What she didn't mention was that she'd been comparing him to Jake for months, finding fault with every quality that didn't measure up to my fiancé's strengths. Without a boyfriend of her own to focus on, Emma's attention turned laser-focused on Jake and me. She started showing up at my apartment unannounced, always with some perfectly reasonable excuse. She needed to borrow my good camera for a work project. She'd been in the neighborhood and thought she'd drop off the sweater I'd left at Mom's. She wanted to cook dinner for me as a thank you for helping her move. Except Jake was always there when she showed up. The dinner invitation was particularly memorable. Emma arrived at 7:30 on a Saturday night, arms full of grocery bags and that bright smile she reserved for important occasions. She'd bought ingredients for Jake's favorite meal, the one he'd mentioned enjoying at a restaurant we'd visited months earlier. How she remembered that specific detail when I'd honestly forgotten about it was beyond me. I thought I'd make Jake's favorite as a thank you for helping me move that dresser last week, she announced, already heading for my kitchen. Except Jake hadn't helped her move any dresser. I had. When I pointed this out, Emma laughed it off. Oh, you know what I mean. You both help me so much. Sometimes I get confused about who did what. Right. Confused. She spent the next 3 hours cooking an elaborate meal while Jake and I watched TV, calling him into the kitchen every few minutes to ask his opinion on seasoning or to have him reach something from a high shelf. Each interruption felt calculated, designed to pull his attention away from me and onto her. And maybe I was being paranoid, but I swear she'd changed clothes between arriving and starting dinner. The casual jeans and sweater had been replaced by a fitted dress that showed off her figure. Your sister's really thoughtful, Jake said during one of her kitchen consultations. Most people wouldn't go to this much trouble. Thoughtful. That's one word for it. The pattern continued for months. Emma would text Jake directly about family events instead of going through me. She'd invite herself along on our dates, claiming she was bored or lonely. She'd seek his advice about everything from job interviews to which car to buy, often calling him instead of me. When I finally confronted her about it, she acted like I was being ridiculous. He's going to be my brother-in-law, she said, using that patient tone usually reserved for explaining things to children. Don't you want us to get along? Would you rather I ignored him? Put like that? My concerns sounded petty, even jealous. Of course I wanted them to get along. But there's a difference between getting along and whatever this was. This felt like Emma was studying Jake, learning his preferences, his humor, his habits. Like she was building a blueprint for how to be the kind of woman he'd choose. The night Jake proposed, Emma was the first person I called. I was bursting with happiness and wanted to share it with my sister. Her response was perfect, at least on the surface. She screamed with excitement, demanded to see the ring, and immediately started talking about wedding plans. But underneath the enthusiasm, I caught something else. A flicker of calculation, like she was already planning her next move. I should have trusted that instinct. The engagement period was when Emma's behavior shifted from concerning to downright obsessive. She volunteered to help with every aspect of wedding planning, which should have been sweet, sisterly support. Instead, it became another way for her to insert herself into my relationship with Jake. She insisted on being present for every vendor meeting, every cake tasting, every decision about flowers or music. Her excuse was always that she wanted to learn for her own future wedding, but Emma wasn't even dating anyone. She'd turned down 3 different setups from friends and family, claiming she was focusing on herself for a while. During one particularly memorable venue visit, the wedding coordinator asked about the groom's preferences for the cocktail hour menu. Before I could answer, Emma jumped in with a detailed explanation of Jake's favorite drinks and appetizers. Information I'd never shared with her. Information she'd somehow gathered through her own conversations with my fiancé. How do you know Jake likes bourbon but not scotch? I asked her in the car afterward. We were talking about it at Mom's birthday party, she replied casually. You were in the bathroom? And he mentioned it when Dad offered him a drink. Maybe that was true. Maybe I was overanalyzing every interaction. But these little moments kept piling up, creating a picture I didn't want to see. Emma knew Jake's coffee order, his work schedule, his favorite movies, his childhood stories. She knew him in ways that went beyond casual family conversation. The bachelor and bachelorette parties were supposed to happen on the same weekend, with Jake's friends taking him to a cabin upstate, while my friends and I stayed in the city. Emma had helped plan my party, booking a spa day and dinner at a trendy restaurant. Everything was arranged. Then, 2 days before the parties, Emma called with disappointing news. The spa had double-booked our time slot. The restaurant had to cancel our reservation due to a kitchen fire. Suddenly, my bachelorette party was in ruins, and there wasn't time to find alternatives. We could just have a quiet girls' night at my place, Emma suggested. Order pizza, watch movies, maybe do some at-home spa treatments. Keep it simple. Simple. Right. What Emma didn't mention was that her apartment was 10 minutes from the cabin where Jake was having his bachelor party. What she also didn't mention was that she'd already texted Jake about potentially stopping by to say hi to the guys if my party ended early. I found out about that text when Jake showed me his phone, thinking it was funny that Emma wanted to crash his party. "Your sister's hilarious," he said, not realizing what he was actually showing me. The message thread between them was longer than I expected, filled with casual conversation that had nothing to do with wedding planning. My stomach dropped as I scrolled through months of texts. Nothing inappropriate, exactly, but intimate in a way that made me uncomfortable. Emma asking about his day, sharing funny stories, sending photos of things she thought he'd find interesting. The kind of constant communication I thought was reserved for couples. When I confronted Emma about it, she acted like I was being paranoid. "We're friends, Chloe. Is that a crime? I thought you'd be happy that I get along with the man you're going to marry." But friends don't usually text each other at 11 at night about random thoughts or send photos of their lunch. Friends don't usually know each other's schedules well enough to check in during stressful work days. This was something else entirely. The night before my wedding, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, trying to shake the feeling that something was very wrong. Emma had been acting strange all week, nervous and excited in a way that didn't match the usual pre-wedding energy. She kept checking her phone and smiling at messages I wasn't allowed to see. Tomorrow was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. I was marrying the man I loved in front of everyone who mattered to us. So why did I feel like I was walking into a trap? The morning of my wedding dawned perfect and clear, the kind of autumn day that makes you believe the universe is conspiring in your favor. I should have known better than to trust appearances. In my experience, the prettiest surfaces often hide the ugliest truths. Emma arrived at the bridal suite at 8 in the morning with coffee and pastries, playing the role of supportive sister flawlessly. She helped me with my makeup, fixed my veil, and took approximately 300 photos of the getting ready process. To anyone watching, we looked like the picture-perfect sisters, united in the joy of my special day. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Emma was performing rather than participating. Every gesture felt calculated, every smile just a little too bright. She kept checking her phone and stepping out to take mysterious calls, claiming they were from the florist or the caterer about last-minute details. "You look absolutely beautiful," she told me as I stood in front of the full-length mirror in my dress. Jake is going to be speechless. The way she said his name, with just a little too much familiarity, made my skin crawl. But I pushed the feeling down. This was my wedding day. I wasn't going to let paranoia ruin it. The ceremony was set for 3 o'clock at the historic Riverside Manor, a venue Jake and I had chosen for its beautiful gardens and classic architecture. We'd invited 200 guests, a mix of family, friends, and colleagues who'd been part of our journey together. Everyone who mattered to us was there, dressed in their finest clothes, ready to celebrate our love story. I waited in the bridal suite as the ceremony began, listening to the string quartet play the processional music for the wedding party. Emma had walked down the aisle as my maid of honor, looking stunning in the navy blue dress we'd chosen together. My bridesmaids followed, and then it was my turn. Dad knocked on the door exactly at 3:15. "Ready, sweetheart?" I took his arm and walked toward the entrance to the ceremony space, my heart pounding with anticipation. Through the glass doors, I could see the guests standing as the wedding march began. Jake was waiting at the altar in his gray suit, smiling that crooked smile I'd fallen in love with 3 years earlier. This was it. The moment I'd been planning for 18 months. The beginning of my life as Mrs. Jake Morrison. The doors opened, and I stepped into the garden where 200 people had gathered to witness our vows. The afternoon sun filtered through the trees, casting everything in golden light. Jake's eyes met mine across the length of the aisle, and for a moment, everything else disappeared. All my worries about Emma, all the stress of wedding planning, all the little doubts that had been nagging at me for weeks faded away. I was halfway down the aisle when the commotion started. Emma, who should have been standing at the altar waiting for me, was suddenly pushing through the crowd of seated guests. Her face was streaked with tears, her carefully applied makeup ruined. She was making her way toward the center aisle, toward Jake, with an expression of desperate urgency. The music faltered as the quartet noticed the disruption. Guests turned in their seats, confusion spreading through the crowd like ripples in a pond. Jake's smile faded as he watched my sister approach, clearly as confused as everyone else about what was happening. I stopped walking, my bouquet trembling in my hands. Whatever Emma was about to do, I knew it was going to change everything. The way she was crying, the determination in her steps, the timing of her dramatic entrance, it all felt orchestrated, planned. Emma reached the front of the ceremony space and turned to face the crowd of wedding guests. Her voice carried clearly through the garden, amplified by the emotional intensity of whatever had driven her to this moment. "Stop the ceremony," she announced, her voice breaking with sobs. "I can't let this happen. I can't let my sister marry a man who cheated on her." The words hit me like a physical blow. Around me, 200 people gasped in unison, a sound like air being sucked from the world. Jake's face went white, his mouth falling open in shock. The officiant, a family friend who'd known us for years, looked between Emma and me with complete confusion. But it was Emma's next words that really destroyed everything. "I saw him with another woman last night. I saw it with my own eyes." The garden fell into the kind of silence that feels like pressure in your ears.
200 people held their breath, waiting to see how this drama would unfold. My father's arm tightened around mine, and I could feel him shaking with either rage or shock, maybe both. Emma stood in the center of all those staring faces, tears streaming down her cheeks, playing the role of heartbroken sister to perfection. The devastated family member forced to reveal a terrible truth. If I hadn't known her my whole life, I might have believed her performance myself. Jake looked like he'd been struck by lightning. His face had gone completely pale, and his mouth opened and closed without any sound coming out. For a moment, he seemed too stunned to even defend himself, which I realized was probably exactly what Emma had counted on. "That's not true," he finally managed, his voice cracking slightly. "Emma, what are you talking about?" But Emma was ready for that response. She'd clearly rehearsed this whole scene. "Don't lie to her anymore, Jake. I saw you last night at the hotel bar with that blonde woman. You were kissing her, and then you went up to her room together. I followed you because I couldn't believe what I was seeing." The details were specific enough to sound believable. The hotel bar where Jake's wedding party had been staying. The blonde woman who could have been anyone. The timeline that would be hard to verify with all the bachelor party chaos. Emma had thought this through carefully. Our guests were starting to murmur among themselves, some of them pulling out their phones to record what was happening. Because nothing says family crisis like making sure you get it on social media, right? I could already imagine the headlines. "Wedding stopped by cheating scandal," and "Sister reveals groom's affair at altar." This was exactly the kind of public humiliation Emma had been building toward for months. Not just ruining my relationship with Jake, but destroying my reputation, my dignity, my entire support system in one dramatic moment. I looked at Jake, searching his face for any sign that Emma's accusation might be true. But all I saw was genuine confusion and growing anger. This was a man who remembered to bring me coffee every morning, who called his grandmother every Sunday, who had spent the last week stressed about whether his vows were good enough. This was not a man who would cheat on me the night before our wedding. "Jake," I said quietly, my voice somehow steady despite the chaos around us. "Did you do what she's saying?" He met my eyes directly. No hesitation, no looking away. "Chloe, I swear on my life I have never cheated on you. I don't know what Emma thinks she saw, but it wasn't me with another woman." The certainty in his voice, the immediate eye contact, the way he said my name like an anchor in the storm, it all felt genuine. But Emma wasn't finished. "He's lying," she sobbed, turning to address the crowd of guests. "I know what I saw, I took pictures, but he made me delete them. He threatened me, said he'd ruin my career if I told Chloe the truth." Now she was claiming Jake had threatened her? The man who couldn't kill a spider without feeling guilty was supposedly intimidating my sister into silence. The story was getting more elaborate by the minute, which is usually what happens when someone is making things up as they go. That's when Jake did something that surprised everyone, including me. Instead of continuing to argue with Emma, instead of getting angry or defensive, he pulled out his phone. The movement was calm, deliberate, and somehow more confident than anything else he'd done since Emma's accusation began. "Actually," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the garden, "I think everyone should hear the whole truth about what happened last night." He looked around at our guests, his expression shifting from confusion to something that looked almost like relief, like he'd been waiting for this moment, preparing for it. "May I borrow the microphone?" he asked the officiant. Emma's face changed then. The confident devastation flickered, replaced by something that looked like panic. She tried to interrupt, tried to say something about not wanting to cause more drama, but Jake was already walking toward the sound system. He took the microphone, tested it with a quick, "hello," and then looked directly at Emma with an expression I'd never seen before. Not angry exactly, but determined in a way that made my stomach flip. "Since we're sharing truths today," Jake said, his voice amplified across the garden,
I think our guests should know exactly what happened last night and why Emma is really trying to stop this wedding. He held up his phone, and even from where I stood, I could see a recording app open on the screen. Emma, you might want to sit down for this. Jake pressed play on his phone, and Emma's voice filled the garden with crystal clarity. The sound system that was supposed to amplify our wedding vows was now broadcasting my sister's confession to 200 stunned guests. Jake, I know this is crazy timing, but I can't stop thinking about you. Emma's recorded voice was breathy, intimate in a way that made my skin crawl. Chloe doesn't deserve you. She never has. The crowd was dead silent. Even the birds seemed to have stopped chirping. Jake let the recording play, his face grim but determined. I watched Emma's expression shift from panic to pure terror as she realized what was happening. You and I, we have a connection, her voice continued through the speakers. I've felt it since the day she brought you home. The way you look at me, the way we understand each other. Tomorrow doesn't have to happen, Jake. We could leave together tonight. I have money saved. We could go anywhere. A collective gasp went through our guests. Several people had their phones out now, recording this complete meltdown of wedding etiquette. My mother was clutching my father's arm, her face white with shock. Jake's parents looked like they wanted to crawl under their chairs, but Emma wasn't done confessing on the recording. If you won't leave with me, then I'll stop the wedding myself. I'll tell everyone you cheated. I'll make up whatever story I need to. Chloe will believe me because she always believes me. She's so trusting, so naive. She has no idea how much I've wanted what's hers. The honesty in her recorded voice was brutal. This wasn't the heat of the moment talking. This was calculated, premeditated destruction. Emma had been planning to ruin my wedding regardless of how Jake responded to her proposition. Jake stopped the recording and looked directly at Emma, who was now backing away from the center of the ceremony space like she was planning to make a run for it. That call came in at 11:47 last night, Jake announced to the crowd. About 20 minutes after Emma texted me asking to meet at the hotel bar. When I didn't respond to her texts, she called me directly. He held up his phone again, showing the call log to anyone close enough to see it. I recorded it because Emma has been making inappropriate advances for months, and I wanted evidence in case something like this happened. I never imagined she'd actually try to destroy Chloe's wedding day, but I wanted to be prepared. Emma finally found her voice, though it came out as a strangled whisper. That's not... You're taking it out of context. I was emotional. I didn't mean... Which part was out of context, Emma? Jake's voice was steady, controlled, but there was steel underneath it. The part where you said you'd make up lies about me cheating? Or the part where you admitted you've been planning this for months? Our wedding guests were murmuring among themselves now, putting together pieces they'd probably noticed but ignored. Emma's constant presence during our relationship, her obsession with wedding planning, the way she'd positioned herself in our lives like she belonged there. I found my voice finally, though it came out shakier than I wanted. Emma, is this true? Did you really plan all of this? She looked at me with tears streaming down her face, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of rage and humiliation, the kind of crying that happens when someone's carefully constructed plan falls apart in the most public way possible. You don't understand, she sobbed. You've always had everything. Perfect grades, perfect job, perfect boyfriend. What about me? What about what I want? The entitlement in her voice was staggering. She'd just tried to destroy my marriage based on complete lies, and somehow she was still the victim in her own mind. What you want? I repeated, my voice getting stronger. You want to steal my fiancé and ruin my wedding because you're jealous? I love him, Emma shouted, her composure finally cracking completely. I love him more than you do. You don't even see how amazing he is. You take him for granted. The garden was so quiet you could hear individual conversations from the reception hall next door. 200 people watching my sister have a complete psychological breakdown at my wedding. This would definitely be a story our family talked about for generations. Jake stepped forward, and for a moment I thought he was going to comfort Emma or try to de-escalate the situation. Instead, he looked her directly in the eyes and said the words that would end her performance forever. Emma, I have never, not once, given you any indication that I was interested in you romantically. Every kindness I showed you was out of respect for Chloe. Every conversation we had was because you inserted yourself into situations where I had no choice but to be polite. I have never wanted anything from you except for you to leave my relationship alone. The brutality of his honesty was breathtaking. Emma physically recoiled like she'd been slapped. What do you think will happen next? Drop your predictions in the comments below. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more family drama that you won't believe. Emma stood there for what felt like an eternity, her face cycling through emotions faster than I could process them. Shock, rage, humiliation, and finally, something that looked like pure hatred. Not the petty jealousy I'd been dealing with for years, but real, venomous hatred directed at everyone who had witnessed her spectacular failure. "Fine," she said, her voice completely different now, cold, calculating, stripped of all the false emotion she'd been performing. "You want the truth? Here's the truth." She turned to face our guests. Makeup streaked down her face, hair disheveled from her dramatic performance. "I did plan this. I've been planning it for months, because my perfect sister doesn't deserve the perfect life she's always gotten handed to her. She doesn't work for anything, she doesn't appreciate what she has, and she definitely doesn't deserve Jake." The honesty was almost refreshing after years of Emma's manipulation and lies. Finally, she was showing everyone exactly who she really was underneath all the sisterly affection. "I've been in love with Jake since the day she brought him home," Emma continued, her voice getting stronger as she embraced her villain role. "And I know he feels something for me too, no matter what he says now. I've seen the way he looks at me." Jake made a sound that might have been a laugh or a scoff. "Emma, I look at you the same way I look at everyone. It's called basic politeness." But Emma was on a roll now, committed to her narrative even as it destroyed her relationships with everyone present. "You're all going to sit here and judge me, but none of you see what I see. Chloe gets everything she wants without even trying. Good grades, good job, good man. Meanwhile, I work twice as hard and get half the recognition. So yes, I decided to take something for myself." My mother finally found her voice. "Emma, stop this. You're embarrassing yourself." "Embarrassing myself?" Emma laughed, a sharp sound that cut through the garden. "Mom, I just tried to steal my sister's fiancé at her own wedding and got caught on recording. I think we're past embarrassment." At least she was self-aware about the scope of her disaster. "The only thing I'm sorry about," Emma said, looking directly at me, "is that it didn't work." That's when something inside me finally snapped. Not into anger exactly, but into a kind of crystalline clarity. I'd spent my entire adult life making excuses for Emma's behavior, trying to understand her jealousy, attempting to include her in my happiness. I'd convinced myself that she was just insecure, just struggling to find her place. But this wasn't insecurity. This was malice. "You know what, Emma?" I said, my voice carrying clearly across the garden without the microphone. "You're right about one thing. You do work harder than me. You work incredibly hard at being miserable. You put enormous effort into finding ways to make everyone around you feel guilty for their happiness. You've turned jealousy into a full-time job." I could see people in the crowd nodding slightly. Finally, someone was saying what they'd all been thinking for years. "But here's what you never understood," I continued, taking a step closer to my sister. "The reason people don't give you what you want isn't because they don't see how hard you try. It's because they can see exactly how hard you try to take things that don't belong to you." Emma's face was getting redder by the minute, but she didn't interrupt. Maybe because she knew I was right, or maybe because she was finally hearing someone speak to her without trying to manage her emotions. "Jake doesn't love you, Emma. He never will. Not because you're not good enough, but because love isn't something you can steal or manipulate or guilt someone into feeling. It's something that grows between people who respect each other, and respect is something you've never shown to anyone in this family." I turned to face our guests, who were watching this family therapy session play out in real time. "I'm sorry everyone had to witness this," I said, "but I'm not sorry it happened, because now we all know exactly who Emma really is. No more pretending, no more making excuses, no more walking on eggshells to protect her feelings while she tries to destroy everyone else's happiness." Emma stood there for another moment, perhaps waiting for someone to defend her or ask her to stay. When it became clear that no one was going to rescue her from the consequences of her choices, she did the only thing she could do. She ran. Not walked quickly or made a dignified exit. She literally ran through the crowd of wedding guests, pushing past confused relatives and family friends, heading for the parking lot like her dress was on fire. We watched her go in complete silence, 200 people processing what they'd just witnessed, trying to figure out what happens next when the maid of honor has a psychological breakdown and flees the ceremony. Finally, Jake cleared his throat and spoke into the microphone again. "Well," he said, that crooked smile starting to appear on his face. That was unexpected. A few people in the crowd laughed, nervous but relieved laughter, the kind that happens when you realize the crisis is over and you can breathe again. "If everyone could take their seats," Jake continued, "I believe Chloe and I have some vows to exchange." The transition from family crisis back to wedding ceremony was surprisingly smooth. Maybe because everyone was so emotionally drained from Emma's performance that they were ready for something positive to focus on. Or maybe because our guests genuinely wanted to see us succeed after witnessing someone try so hard to destroy our happiness. The officiant, A family friend named Pastor Williams, who'd known me since childhood, stepped forward with a gentle smile. "Well," he said, adjusting his glasses, "in 30 years of performing wedding ceremonies, I can honestly say this is a first. But if everyone's ready, I think we have a wedding to finish." The crowd settled back into their seats, though there was definitely more murmuring than you'd typically expect during a ceremony. People were still processing what had just happened, still looking toward the parking lot where Emma had disappeared, still trying to figure out how to react to the most dramatic family meltdown they'd ever witnessed. I took a moment to look around at our guests. My parents, who looked like they'd aged 10 years in the last 20 minutes. Jake's family, who were trying to project supportive normalcy despite the chaos. Our friends, some of whom had their phones out and were clearly planning to discuss this event for the rest of their lives. But you know what? I didn't care. For the first time in years, I felt completely free. No more worrying about Emma's feeling. No more walking on eggshells around her jealousy. No more making excuses for her behavior or trying to include her in events where she'd inevitably cause drama. Emma had finally shown everyone exactly who she was, and the burden of managing her dysfunction was no longer my responsibility. Jake took my hands, and I could feel some of the tension leaving my body. This man had handled my sister's manipulation better than I had. He'd prepared for her sabotage, documented her harassment, and protected our relationship with a level of foresight I hadn't even realized he possessed. "You okay?" he whispered, just loud enough for me to hear. "I'm perfect," I whispered back, and meant it. Pastor Williams cleared his throat and began the ceremony again. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to join Chloe and Jake in holy matrimony. Despite some unexpected interruptions, the love between these two people has proven strong enough to withstand any challenge." He paused and looked out at the crowd with a slight smile. "And I think we can all agree, if their relationship can survive the last 20 minutes, it can survive anything." That got a genuine laugh from our guests. The tension broke like a fever, and suddenly we were back to celebrating instead of surviving. Jake and I had written our own vows, and after everything that had just happened, the words felt even more meaningful. When Jake promised to protect our relationship from anyone who tried to harm it, several people in the crowd actually applauded. When I promised to never let family dysfunction overshadow our happiness, my mother started crying. The ring exchange went smoothly. No one objected when Pastor Williams asked if anyone had reasons we shouldn't be married, though I'm pretty sure a few people glanced toward the parking lot just to make sure Emma hadn't decided to make a dramatic return. "You may kiss the bride," Pastor Williams announced, and Jake didn't hesitate. The kiss was perfect. Soft, genuine, filled with relief and love and the promise of a future that would be ours alone. When we broke apart, the crowd erupted in applause that was louder and more enthusiastic than any wedding I'd ever attended. As we walked back down the aisle as husband and wife, I caught sight of Emma's abandoned bouquet lying on the ground where she'd dropped it during her escape. The flowers were already wilting in the afternoon sun, a perfect metaphor for her destructive plans. Our photographer, who had captured every moment of the drama, was still snapping pictures as we made our way toward the reception hall. I made a mental note to ask her to edit out most of Emma's meltdown from our official wedding album. Some moments are better left in the past. The cocktail hour began immediately, and the atmosphere was unlike anything I could have imagined. Our guests were energized, bonded by the shared experience of witnessing something completely unprecedented. People who barely knew each other were introducing themselves and discussing what they'd just seen. It was like Emma's breakdown had turned our wedding into the most memorable event anyone would attend all year. "Your sister's quite the performer," Jake's cousin mentioned as we made our rounds greeting guests. "Former sister," I corrected, and realized I meant it. The reception was turning into the best party I'd ever attended, which is saying something considering it started with my maid of honor having a psychological breakdown and confessing to attempted relationship sabotage. But there's something about surviving a crisis together that makes people want to celebrate life, and our guests were definitely in a celebratory mood. The band, who had been briefed on the earlier drama by our wedding coordinator, decided to lean into the theme of overcoming obstacles. Their first song was Stronger by Kelly Clarkson, which got everyone on the dance floor immediately. Nothing like a good survival anthem to get the party started. Jake and I had our first dance to At Last by Etta James, and I finally understood what people meant when they talked about everything else fading away. After years of Emma inserting herself into our relationship, trying to be the third person in our couple, it was just the two of us on that dance floor. Finally. "No regrets?" Jake asked as we swayed to the music. "About Emma? None whatsoever? About marrying you?" I grinned. "Ask me in 50 years. During the father-daughter dance, my dad apologized for not seeing Emma's behavior for what it really was. "I kept thinking she was just going through a rough patch," he said quietly. "I never imagined she'd try something like this. Dad, you raised 2 daughters. One of them turned out great, and one of them turned out to be Emma. That's not your fault. But maybe if we'd gotten her help earlier, set better boundaries. Maybe, I agreed. But that was her choice to make, not ours to force on her. The dinner speeches were interesting, considering the maid of honor was supposed to give one but was presumably somewhere having an existential crisis in her car. Jake's best man, his brother Mike, stepped up to fill the gap. I've known Jake my whole life, Mike said, raising his glass. And I've never seen him as happy as he's been with Chloe. I've also never seen him handle a crisis as well as he did today. The crowd laughed and applauded. Mike continued. Jake told me months ago that Emma was making him uncomfortable, and he was worried about how it might affect his relationship with Chloe. He started recording their conversations because he wanted evidence if things got out of hand. Turns out, that was excellent foresight. I looked at Jake with new appreciation. He'd been protecting our relationship long before I'd realized it needed protection. So here's to Jake and Chloe, Mike concluded, for proving that real love can survive fake drama and that the best families are the ones you choose, not necessarily the ones you're born with. Another round of applause, this one with genuine warmth instead of the shocked energy from earlier. My mother gave a short speech about how proud she was of both her daughters, then stopped herself and corrected it to, my daughter. Apparently, Emma's wedding day performance had clarified some things for her too. As the evening went on, something unexpected happened. Instead of people avoiding the topic of Emma's meltdown, they started sharing their own stories about toxic family members. Apparently, everyone has that one relative who specializes in making other people miserable, and witnessing Emma's spectacular failure had given people permission to talk about their own experiences. My brother tried to break up my first marriage because he thought my wife was too good for me, one of Jake's co-workers shared during cocktails. My sister borrowed money from me for 10 years, and then accused me of being selfish when I finally said no, added one of my college friends. It was like Emma's public breakdown had opened a door for honest conversation about family dysfunction. People were bonding over their shared experiences with narcissistic relatives and celebrating their own decisions to set boundaries. Around 9 o'clock, my phone buzzed with a text message. I almost ignored it, but something made me check. It was from Emma. I'm leaving town tonight. Don't try to contact me. You got what you wanted. I showed the message to Jake, who shook his head. Even her apology is about how we wronged her. I thought about responding. Maybe trying one last time to reach whatever was left of the sister I'd grown up with. Then I realized that sister had probably never existed. The Emma I'd been trying to save and include and understand was just a projection of who I'd wanted her to be. I deleted the message without responding and blocked her number. No regrets? Jake asked, watching me put my phone away. None at all. 3 months later, I was unpacking the last box in our new apartment when I found the wedding album our photographer had finally delivered. I'd been dreading this moment, wondering how she'd handled the Emma situation, and whether our official photos would be forever tainted by the memory of family drama. But when I opened the album, I was amazed. Our photographer had somehow captured the story of our wedding day in a way that actually made Emma's breakdown look like a plot twist that led to our triumph. There were photos of the confusion and shock on people's faces, then photos of the relief and celebration after the truth came out. She'd documented our journey from crisis to joy with artistic precision. The final photos of Jake and me dancing, surrounded by genuinely happy friends and family, told the real story. This wasn't the wedding we'd planned, but it was the wedding we'd needed. The day we learned who our real support system was and who we needed to let go of. In the months since the wedding, the silence from Emma had been absolute. She'd kept her word about leaving town. Mom had heard through a family friend that she'd moved to Portland and was working at an advertising agency under her middle name. No social media presence. No contact with anyone from home. Complete radio silence. Part of me had expected her to try to rebuild bridges after the dust settled. Maybe send a letter or ask our parents to mediate some kind of reconciliation. But Emma had always been all or nothing, and apparently she'd chosen nothing. Do you miss her? Jake asked one evening as we cooked dinner together in our new kitchen. It was a question he'd asked a few times over the months, and my answer had evolved. I miss who I thought she was, I said, stirring the pasta sauce. I miss the idea of having a sister who actually wanted me to be happy. But Emma? The real Emma who tried to destroy our wedding out of jealousy? No, I don't miss her at all. Our relationship had grown stronger in ways I hadn't expected. Going through a crisis together, especially one that involved someone trying to manipulate both of us, had created a level of trust and communication that might have taken years to develop otherwise. We talked about everything now, including the uncomfortable stuff. I should have told you earlier about how Emma was acting, Jake said, a conversation we'd had several times but seemed to need to keep having. I kept thinking maybe I was overreacting, and I should have trusted my instincts instead of making excuses for her behavior, I replied. We both learned something. We'd also learned that our friends and extended family were more supportive than we'd realized. After witnessing Emma's public meltdown, people had gone out of their way to check on us and express their support. It was like her dramatic exit had actually strengthened our community instead of dividing it. My parents had struggled the most with Emma's absence. They'd tried reaching out to her a few times, sending letters and emails that went unanswered. Eventually, they'd accepted that Emma had chosen to cut off contact completely, and they'd started focusing on repairing the damage her years of manipulation had done to our family dynamics. I think we enabled her behavior without realizing it, my mother admitted during one of our monthly dinners. We were so focused on managing her emotions that we never held her accountable for her actions. It was progress. Painful, but necessary progress. The most surprising development had been hearing from other family members about their own experiences with Emma. Apparently, she'd been manipulating and lying to people for years, but everyone had kept quiet because they didn't want to cause family drama. Her wedding day confession had given people permission to share their own stories. She told me you were jealous of her success, and that's why you never invited her to things, my cousin revealed months later. I thought it was weird because you always seemed so supportive of her. She borrowed money from me for a business investment and then told other people I was pressuring her to pay me back too quickly, an aunt added. I felt horrible about it until I realized she'd never intended to pay me back at all. Emma had been playing different family members against each other for years, creating confusion and conflict that she could then step in to help resolve. Her absence had allowed us to compare notes and realize the extent of her manipulation. The wedding album also included photos from our honeymoon in Italy, which had been absolutely perfect. No family drama, no unexpected crises, just 2 weeks of exploring beautiful places together and talking about our future. We'd made decisions about everything from where we wanted to live to how many kids we wanted, all without worrying about how our choices might affect Emma's feelings. Freedom, it turned out, was even better than I'd imagined. 1 year after the wedding, Jake and I decided to host a small anniversary party. Nothing elaborate, just close friends and family gathering in our apartment to celebrate making it through our first year of marriage. As I sent out the invitations, I realized for the first time that I didn't have to consider Emma's feelings or whether she might cause drama at the event. She simply wasn't part of our lives anymore. The party was everything our wedding reception could have been if we'd known then what we knew now. Relaxed, genuine, filled with people who actually wanted us to succeed. My parents came and they seemed lighter somehow, freed from the constant stress of managing Emma's emotional crises. You look happy, my mother observed as she helped me arrange flowers in the kitchen. I am happy, I realized. Really, genuinely happy for the first time in years. It was true. I hadn't realized how much emotional energy I'd been spending on worrying about Emma until I stopped. Without her constant drama and manipulation in the background, I'd been able to focus on building the life I actually wanted instead of constantly defending the life I had. Jake's brother Mike pulled me aside during the party to share some interesting news. I heard from a mutual friend that Emma's been telling people in Portland that she's estranged from her family because they didn't support her career goals, he said. Apparently, she's painted herself as the victim of family jealousy. I wasn't surprised. Emma had always been skilled at rewriting history to cast herself in the best possible light. What did surprise me was how little I cared about her narrative anymore. Let her tell whatever story helps her sleep at night, I said. The people who matter know the truth. As the evening wound down and our guests started to leave, I found myself reflecting on how much had changed in just 1 year. I'd learned to set boundaries with family members, to trust my instincts about people's behavior, and to prioritize my own happiness instead of constantly sacrificing it to keep peace with someone who never wanted peace in the first place. Jake and I had also learned that we were a strong team. We'd survived someone actively trying to destroy our relationship, and we'd come out stronger on the other side. If we could handle Emma's worst behavior, we could handle whatever else life threw at us. Any regrets? Jake asked as we cleaned up after the party, the same question he'd been asking since our wedding day. Just one, I said, hanging up dish towels. I regret not standing up to Emma years earlier. I wasted a lot of time trying to fix a relationship that she had no interest in fixing. But you know what? I continued, wiping down the counters. Even that regret is useful. It taught me not to make the same mistake with other people. Not everyone deserves unlimited chances to hurt you. We'd heard through the family grapevine that Emma was doing well professionally in Portland. She'd gotten a promotion at her agency and was apparently dating someone she'd met through work. I was genuinely glad to hear she was building a life for herself. but I felt no urge to reach out or repair our relationship. Some bridges, once burned, are better left that way. As I turned off the lights in our apartment, I thought about the wedding album sitting on our bookshelf. The photos told the story of the day someone tried to destroy our happiness and failed spectacularly, but they also told the story of our community rallying around us, of love surviving manipulation, of truth winning out over lies. Emma had given us an unexpected gift that day. By showing everyone exactly who she was, she'd freed me from years of guilt and obligation. She'd taught our entire family that enabling toxic behavior doesn't help anyone, including the person behaving badly. Most importantly, she'd proven that our love was strong enough to withstand her worst efforts to destroy it. "Good night, Mrs. Morrison," Jake said as we headed to bed. "Good night, Mr. Morrison," I replied, and realized that Emma had inadvertently given us the perfect wedding story. Not the fairy tale we'd planned, but something better. A love story that had been tested and proven unbreakable. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe for more real-life family drama that proves truth really is stranger than fiction. Sometimes the people who try hardest to destroy your happiness end up giving you the greatest gift of all, the freedom to live your life without them.